The Buffalo Bills who win
blocked by Singletary, and it's caught for a touchdown. Cole Beasley. Here they come. Down he goes. Corkscrewed in by the rookie.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome to another segment of the Bills Yac Podcast. Got my guy Greg, the Sports Bully Boucher, in the building with me as normal. We got a guy we have to talk about today, Josh Norman. Norman has been a hot topic in Buffalo since the moment he got here, the moment he signed. Some would say his 2020 season was undesirable. Some people would say, hey, we need to run it back for 2021. We're going to break him down a little bit today and get into how we feel about it, because I think we may be on two different ends of the spectrum, if you want to call it that, when it comes to our guy Norman. So, Greg, what you do? Let's get to it, man. Josh Norman, what you think about bringing him in last year? What you think about how he did? What are we talking about? What's up with Norman?
Jumping right in, I mean, I think right off the rip you get this feeling of, oh, here's another Carolina pipeline prospect that we're going to go in and try to salvage. And I think last year it was a little redundant, bringing Mario Addison and Butler and then, to add Norman into the mix too. It just seemed like we were kind of trying to strike gold a little too hard there. But I'm kind of mixed about his season this year. I think we weren't expecting much from him. I know there was a lot of people saying, he can come back into McDermott's defense and have a resurgence and he could be back like he was 5-6 years ago. I wasn't expecting that from him. I was just hoping he could add some sort of stability to cornerback too, across from Trey White. And I mean, I guess you could argue that in a sense he did to some extent. Was he stellar? Was he a lockdown corner? Was he reminiscent of, the 5 years ago Josh Norman? Absolutely not. And I think those days are gone for him. But he did add a little bit of stability to a very, unstable position for us. So I'm mixed on it. I feel both ways on it about what he did for us this year and, what he could do possibly for us next year. But I think you got to look at the facts, man. And the guy's going to be, he's 33 now. He will play some games next year at 34 years old as a cornerback. And, he's definitely declined in talent. So it's up for debate, where he stands next year.
I guess, when Josh signed with Buffalo, I saw stability coming to the number 2 spot. And at the very least, if he wasn't guaranteed the spot, and I think when we saw the $6 million guaranteed money, we knew right then and there, like, say, this guy's probably slated to be the starter across from White. At the very least, I knew he would add competition. And I thought that what this team lacked, and I mean, I go all the way back to the moment that Rob Gronkowski jumped on Trey White's head to give him concussion, and the defensive players just kind of stood around, Preston Brown in particular, the rest of these guys, like, hey, what's going on? They throw a flag. I thought that this defense lacked some intensity and fire since that moment, and I always thought that McDermott's defense lacked intensity and fire up until this year. It seemed like this year alone, some guys started revving the engine and like, hey, I'm going to get in your face. And it was nice to see. I think you do need that if you're going to become a championship football team. And obviously you want to keep it in check and hone it in. But if you're going to be a championship football team, I think you do need some of that element added in. And I thought that's what he was going to bring. Unfortunately, we know he went down in camp with the injury that kind of hindered him through probably the first half of the season. And you already talk about a guy coming to a new team, a new system, and not even having a regular camp. Anyway, I thought he did an amicable job stepping right in there and playing. If you look at the QB completion percentages, he was actually second on the team as far as QB rating allowed against him at 84. I think it was 84%. Trey White was at 79. Levi Wallace was actually a surprising, I think, 86. I thought he would have been a lot higher because I didn't think Levi had a good season. And Teron Johnson was at 90%. So end of the day, I thought he was the second best cornerback on this team. But moving forward, I know some people are asking for upgrades, and I'm okay with running it back.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot would have to go into that in the discussion and see what we do in the draft and what else, what other pieces fall. Now, obviously, this offseason is going to be a very unsteady offseason for us with trying to figure out the cap. We got a lot of other question marks, on the interior offensive line, the J.J. Watt thing, bringing back Darrell Williams, letting Milano walk. So there's a ton of other issues floating around this offseason as to who to appropriate money for. And I would put Josh Norman on the back end of that list for sure. But, I mean, the question still remains. We have yet to really find that answer across from Trey White. We've tried the EJ Gaines thing. We tried the, bringing in Levi Wallace. Like I said, we've tried to throw a lot of things at that, but we really haven't made the effort to make it right. And I think now is the time that we do that. Whether, depending on how the draft falls, there's definitely could be, an Asante Samuels type player in the at 30 for us there that would make a lot of sense if we want to address that early, depending on what other things we do in the offseason, what other things we fill. But, there are some kind of plug in and play type corners that could be there at 30 and maybe so on into the second round. So I think that has a lot to do with it. But if we're just talking about what Josh Norman can do for this team, I mean, he's a 33-year-old cornerback whose best days are far, far behind him. And even though he was sustainable, is that what we want? Is that what's going to separate us and make us move forward? Is just bringing in an average at best cornerback to play over a below average cornerback really the answer? I don't think so. I think maybe it's time to walk away and find a better option. Even in Levi Wallace, I think that whole position group needs to be reexamined, pretty fiercely, and I think a lot of things that we'll probably delve into is Dane Jackson.
Well, I mean, I'm high on Dane Jackson, and this is why Dane Jackson specifically, and I'm happy you mentioned him, is the main reason that I'm okay with running it back with Josh Norman one another season. Because if you think Dane Jackson may be the guy, and in the short stint that we saw him in there, he seemed pretty solid. Now, obviously, as I said, the short stints is the key word. There's a 16-game season in a 4-quarter football game that has to be played, and a lot of people can play well in short.
Levi Wallace looked pretty good his rookie year too. How that panned out.
Right. So I'm okay with it because, like I said, it just if you're gonna keep running, and I guess I'll talk about scheme fill, but if you're gonna keep running this cover 3, cover 4 zone, that pretty much what we're running 80% of the time. Then if you're going to have money allocated into Jordan Poyer, Micah Hyde, and now Tre'Davious White being a top 5 paid cornerback in the NFL, then at some point you're not going to even allocate high draft capital possibly or a lot of money into that second position. Now, do I think Josh Norman comes back on a 1-year, $6 million deal? No, I think that price tag has come down. Mm-hmm. And in a salary cap year where we don't know where the hell this cap actually going to be, we don't know if we know it's going to be no lower than 180, which will put the Bills at negative like $1 million or 100,000, something around that area. Getting Josh Norman back on a $3 million deal, $2 million deal, maybe $2.5 million deal with incentives, bump it up to 4.5, maybe 5, I'm okay with. I just feel that at the end of the day, we can't allocate any money to cornerback until we allocate money to defensive end and a pass rush.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we said earlier, there's priorities to be taken, and I think, obviously you can't just dismiss the cornerback position because you have Trey White across from it. I think there has to be some attention given to it, but I think there's other needs, other pressing needs, especially when you're talking about spending some money. And I think that's why this year's draft to me is very, very intriguing, because there's so many different directions that we can go, and it's almost a domino effect. Depending on where we go at 30, it's going to put us in a position, obviously in the second and third round, and a lot of those positions that we need, talent drops off significantly in the second and third round. So it's not a very deep class for the positions that we need to address, which is kind of an alarming thing. So bringing Josh Norman in to provide that stability again, on like you said, on a very cheap deal. Okay, I wouldn't be disgusted by that, but my fear is he's already 33. He's already shown that he's been, sustains injuries. He's more susceptible to being hurt the older he's getting. So obviously there's a risk involved with any player you bring in, but obviously the risk is greater when you're talking about a player who's 33 years old, and if he gets hurt again. So I almost depending on the money, I'm okay with it. That if it's an extremely cheap deal, but I just there's this part of me that's just I'm just tired of kind of throwing band-aids on things in different areas. And that position to me has been a band-aid for some time now. And I would just like to see them do something significant or have somebody step up finally and just take control of that position. And it'd be great if, somebody that we're paying a rookie deal to, like a Levi Wallace at the time, who we're paying peanuts to, could have stepped up and just really excelled. But, that's easier said than done in the NFL. But we need to address that some way, somehow. And, Josh Norman, he's just another Band-Aid in my eyes.
And I guess I understand the Band-Aid point, and I'm not going to disagree with it. But unfortunately, with this NFL salary cap, there's going to be a lot of teams, a lot of contending teams that's going to be putting Band-Aids all over the place. And if COVID wasn't a Band-Aid alone, because of the salary cap drop, it's going to be a lot of teams going to have Band-Aids. Hell, a lot of teams are going to go into the season with just open wounds and scabs. It's just going to be what it is. But if you can get Josh Norman back on a 1 year, $3 million deal, I'm fine with it. And if you want to use a top pick in the NFL draft to think you're going to shore up that spot, as long as you have shored up the pass rush, then I'm fine with that. Because as we've seen, if you're going to give a quarterback 7 to 8 seconds to throw, which I think we were doing at times this season, it doesn't matter who the hell the cornerback is out there. Trey White, you could have Trey White, Marshawn Lattimore, and I don't know, Patrick Peterson out there, and they're not going to be a cover for that long. So I feel like the other part with Josh Norman is that I feel that people used the Derrick Henry play to define his season, and that was not his season. That was a very bad moment for him, a very bad moment that went viral and will be viral forever. But end of the day, a lot of people had moments like that versus Derrick Henry going back to high school.
I mean that's you're talking about one of the most dominant physical running backs, playing football, going up against a cornerback who made a piss poor attempt at tackling an animal like Henry high and got completely manhandled. I mean, should that define his time in Buffalo? No, of course. Is it going to be a poster? Is it going to be a meme and a GIF and all that stuff on social media? Of course it will. But that doesn't make me feel any less confident in his ability to play. There's probably a good, even though his was a pretty dramatic toss and it was pretty much I think everybody collectively went whoa when that happened. But I'm not expecting Josh Norman to be a physical run defender coming up and filling off the edge there against a Derrick Henry in the open field. I'm expecting him to provide us with some decent coverage. And like I said, if you look back last year, he kind of did do that. He was a PFF, and I don't put too much stock into PFF all the time, but they had him graded at a 70 last year, which is kind of in the mid-range. And he did play 344 snaps, and he was on the field, and he contributed. And, he's never been a real true ball hawk, even at his best, So I wasn't expecting him to have, a 7 interception season. But I think he was average. He was as expected. He was as advertised. And I think that the crowd that thought we were going to get some, like I was saying earlier, some sort of resurgence of, this lockdown cornerback who was, just setting the NFL on fire, a couple years back. I think they were sadly mistaken. I think we got what we paid for to a certain extent. I think it was a little hefty for a guy who was going to come in and be a role player. But I think last year we threw a lot of money at a lot of former Carolina players. There must have been some sort of, off the field bet that was made that we don't know about. That, McDermott owed some money to these dudes. So, but I don't know. I would like to see them do something differently, for sure.
I mean, if you really want to review the Carolina connection, I mean, Josh Norman does not rank at the bottom of that list as far as guys that we've brought in from there. And I mean, I'm hoping that the Carolina pipeline is now over with and enough is enough. But like I said, if you really dive into the numbers here, and this is something I've really been looking into lately, just the advanced stats for him. If you go back to his Washington last couple years, 2018 completion percentage 66.3. 2019 completion percentage 67.4. Come to Buffalo this year, completion percentage 65.6. If you look at the QB rate in the last couple of years, 2018 in Washington 109.3, 128.5 in 2019, 84 QB rating against them in Buffalo for 2020 here. You know, it's pretty solid. You know, it's obviously he definitely got back to a lot better form, or the kind of Josh Norman should have come what we knew, because I never thought Josh Norman was all world.
Yeah.
He's never been in the top 5, top 10 of cornerbacks in the NFL. He had one great season. That's what it was. It was legit just that. One great NFL season and nothing more. He got paid off of it. It's great. Great business decision.
Yeah.
It was like crashing in on Bitcoin for him. That's what he did. But what he brought to this Buffalo team, I thought, was a little bit more stability if he would not have been injured for the first half of the season. And I thought he brought a little bit of fire. And hell, we actually saw him make some plays. There were some key plays that he made this year.
Yeah, like I said, and I think there is something to be said for that veteran type of savvy. And I think you were striking on it earlier, that how this defense was kind of just laid back in a sense, that we didn't see that fire. We've been missing that swagger. And, you know, for all Josh Norman's flaws, he does have that kind of in-your-face swagger. And, you know, obviously he doesn't, you know, he's not locking things down and backing it up in that sense, but he does have that fire, and he does bring a little bit of intensity to the defense. And you've seen him, you know, maybe he didn't make that play, but he always seemed to be trying to make the play, coming in on a pile, trying to strip the ball out, you know, trying to get his hands on a ball. So, you know, I like that about him. You know, I definitely can see that, you know, for that factor and how that helped us out and stuff like that. You know, like I said, I just keep coming back to, yeah, he's played his worth in Buffalo, and I think he helped us out this year because, and I saw someone make a comment, I think it was on social media, that what would we have done if we didn't have Josh Norman this year? You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah. we kind of commented on the money that he was given, and it was kind of, like I said, you and I both agree that it was a little much for where he was, especially coming off one of the historically worst seasons of a cornerback in recent times. So to pay him what we paid him was a little ridiculous. But if we didn't have Josh Norman, now a lot of people say, well, we had Dane Jackson. Okay, you know, him flashing a couple good plays in a couple of games was great. It'll give us something to talk about this offseason, but we don't know what he would have done out there. And I think if the coaches really believed that he was going to take over and be a shutdown corner, they would have had his ass out there. Right. So there was obviously he was showing something in practices and meetings that they weren't 100% confident in ushering him out there over Wallace and Norman. So if we didn't have Norman last year, I'm not saying we wouldn't have done the things that we did, but it would have been a different type of season to not have that consistent, confident depth at cornerback, especially when Levi Wallace wasn't, you know, a lockdown corner. So I think, to me, I feel like thank you for your service. Thank you for helping out and contributing in 2020, getting an AFC East championship, getting us within 2 good quarters of going to a Super Bowl. But if you're not willing to play for, you know, damn near league minimum, I'm okay with saying my goodbyes to Josh Norman.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm okay with him going a little bit above league minimum. You know, I'm okay with $3 million. That's the number I'm set at. Anything over that has to be incentive based. Anything over $3 million has to be like, listen, you got to play 16 games, you got to be healthy, you got to get this many interceptions. Like, it has to be completely incentive based. But I'm okay with a 1-year, $3 million deal because, like I said, with the way that the league is set right now, the way that the draft is at right now, even if, say, just for say example, if we were able to land an Asante Samuel Jr. at the 30th pick or another cornerback or something like that with high draft capital, I'm still okay with having Josh Norman in the fold. Because, hell, I don't even know what this next offseason is going to be. I don't know if they're going to be able to have training camp. We could have another outbreak, then we're right back to square one again. But what I don't want to do is I don't want to go into another offseason wishing that Levi Wallace is going to be the guy. I don't want to go into another offseason thinking that I think a guy who I think is vastly overrated and Teron Johnson is going to step in and be the guy. I think that both of these guys, to a point, have showed that they're not that guy. They're not going to be that guy. And Josh Norman, I know what I'm getting. That's what I do know. I know what I'm getting. I know what I'm not going to get. With these guys these young guys from week to week, I don't know what the hell I'm getting. I don't know what they're going to come up to show. They're going to come up to play. I don't know if Teron Johnson will get hurt running, crashing his body into a 260-pound tight end. I don't know if Levi Wallace is going to be a high point to ball this week like he did last week. I don't know, but I do know what I'm getting from Josh Norman.
I agree with you 100%. I think you make some really good points there in terms of just having that safety blanket of a Josh Norman and a veteran. I think you make a good point as we don't know what this preseason is going to look like, and to count on a rookie corner coming in, even one as good as a first-round pick coming in and being able to adjust to the NFL, really without a preseason under his belt, without preseason games under his belt, that's a tall order for especially a cornerback to adjust to the coverages and the speed of the NFL game to come in right away and be the guy. So to have a Josh Norman there who can kind of be a safety blanket to transition a rookie corner or a Dane Jackson to a starting role, it does make sense. But what we were saying earlier, you do know what you're going to get from Josh Norman. And you said you could break down, he's got a good chunk of years to kind of look at and see what you're going to get from him. My fear with him is at any given time, I know you could say that with anybody, but at any given time, Josh Norman's going to break down. Josh Norman has already lost a step. He's already had durability issues. So are we going back to the well too many times with Josh Norman? Is there not another better option out there? And I said, we're going to be seeing everyone's going to have to cut some fat. Everyone's going to have to make some tough decisions. And we're going to see over these next, days and weeks to come, a lot of players getting put out on the market. And maybe, just maybe, if we hold on a minute, somebody better than Josh Norman will fall to us. Maybe a younger, healthier option will fall to us in the same price range. So I think it's a buyer's market right now. I think it's going to be a buyer's market with a lot of teams having to cut and make cap space. So right now, yes, Josh Norman seems like a safe bet, but maybe next week we'll see a guy, who's younger and a little bit better come available, and that we can get him for, within the same kind of money,
Right. I mean, you already see guys getting released. You see Patrick Peterson and the rumors of him not be able to come to a deal, and one day it's a deal. It's not true. One day it is true that he's done in Arizona, which I think he's going to be done. Obviously, Richard Sherman has already stated, as he's his own agent, so we know what he's saying, this fact that he won't be going back to San Francisco. There are guys out there that's available, but when you start getting to those type of names, that price tag is, you're not looking at $3 million. You're probably looking at well above $7 million. At that point, unless they just really, really want to try to get a ring, and I don't see either one of those guys doing that. I guess the only other option really for me is the draft, draft capital and high draft capital and bringing in a younger guy. And like I said, at that point, I am still okay with bringing Norman back into the fold. I'm actually okay with bringing Norman back into the fold and not bringing Levi Wallace back into the fold at this point.
Like I said, we could definitely make the argument both ways. Levi Wallace has had his chance to kind of seize that spot and really kind of proclaim himself as a legitimate NFL corner. And I think the fact that if we were the old Buffalo Bills that were kind of not in contention and we were, going 7-9, 8-8, Levi Wallace coming back on a cheap deal would be, oh, okay, this makes sense. This is okay. We're not that team anymore. And every move and every roster spot is so significant in a sense that we're so close. And the window is always tight in terms of capitalizing on a team and getting to a Super Bowl and winning it. So every position really, really matters. And if we're not getting the value out of a cornerback position in a pass-happy league, and when we know our nemesis is Kansas City and what they're doing over there, and the aerial attack that they have, rolling out a very average at best cornerback is a liability. So I'm one for walking away from Levi Wallace because I think his time is over with. We're good with what he attempted to give us, and investing in a new cornerback. Dane Jackson keeping the fold, but don't forget Dane Jackson was a 7th round pick for a reason.
Correct.
That he obviously had some sort of limitations. He had some issues in his evaluation, and that made him a 7th round pick. So if he was, not say you can't, turn chicken, into chicken salad, but he was a 7th round pick for a reason. So if we can turn around and invest a top 3 pick into a cornerback and bring them out there into a fold with a veteran like Josh Norman on a very cheap deal to help kind of mold them and get them through this possible COVID preseason again, I'm all right with that. But it's got to be a very team-friendly deal. And like I said, if we hold out and see what other fruit falls from the trees in these weeks to come, and I'm not saying on the echelon of a Patrick Peterson or a Richard Sherman.
Yeah.
Like I agree with you 100%. Those guys are going to be priced well out of what we want to pay for that position. But you never know what kind of mid-level player will become a cap casualty or a roster casualty and be made available that we could look at and say, hey, you know what? We're going to pay possibly Josh Norman $3 million. This guy's younger, better. We can pay him $4 million.
No, I agree. I mean, I think this is going to be one of the more interesting moves. And I've said before that one of the biggest problems I have with Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane is I feel like they pay for loyalty. And I think we've seen that through this Carolina connection. I think we've seen that through guys who we deem were washed up that we've overpaid. I do believe we've seen this with Jerry Hughes. I know we've seen this with Mario Addison. I know we've seen a bad contract with Star Lotulelei. Even though we missed Star dearly, his contract is still, no matter how bad we missed him, his contract is still, amount of years and the money he was paid is still way over what it should have been.
Yeah.
I think we've seen this in AJ Klein, and I think we saw this in Josh Norman last year again. And we're going to have to see what happens with this situation because it's going to be very interesting to see what they decide to do ultimately with Norman.
Yeah, like I said, it's almost kind of depressing in a sense to hear you just rattle off all those Carolina players and all the money we appropriated to them. And, like I said, for all the great decisions Beane has made and the moves that he's made and stuff like that, it's a head scratcher as to what, the comfortability of it, the understanding of the players, why there's such an affection for Carolina players that played in their system. And, why we're spending so much money and giving such favorable deals to players that, by all accounts, are very below average or average at best at earning the money that they're earning. The Mario Addison thing, the years for a 33-year-old pass rusher who's been, average at best. Sometimes he's been pretty good. The money that we paid him. Vernon Butler has been a bust since his first step in Carolina and played like one while he was there. And AJ Klein got paid pretty well to be a rotational at best linebacker. And don't get me wrong, I enjoyed AJ Klein when he started turning it on. But when you looked at that in the preseason and said, well, what the hell are we doing here? Oh, what? Because he played at Carolina back in the day? Why? So I would like to see that stop, and I'd like to see them start to make some smarter moves in terms of, and they have no choice this year but to make smarter moves. They can't just throw around money. So it'll be interesting to see how Beane approaches this offseason and addressing that cornerback 2 position. That seems to kind of been an afterthought their entire regime.
Yeah. Well, time will tell. Personally, I would like to see this defense as a whole go to more of a man cover scheme at times. I think we'll get the best of the abilities out of the cornerbacks that we have if we were a man instead of sitting back and I feel a lazy zone defense, a bend but don't break defense.
Yeah.
And if you're going to do that, then no, I would not bring Josh Norman back. Hell, I wouldn't bring half of the secondary back if we're going to play that type of defense. But we're going to see what happens and what happens going forward, and we'll see if Josh Norman will be back. I personally think he will. I think it'll be a 1-year very cheap deal. I think it may be cheaper, maybe $2 million. He says he loves it here. He was getting involved in the community. I don't think at his age he wants to continue moving. And hell, I do not think he wants to go to another system or with another training staff.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. Like I said, we've kind of went back and forth, and we put all the cards on the table in terms of what revolves around the cornerback position and what Josh Norman potentially means to this team and stuff like that. And I said, at the end of the day, I think we started off that we felt like we were on polar opposites of the decision here, but I think we both kind of agree that for the right money, Josh Norman does make sense, but we would also like to see them address it more permanently going forward. And I think that comes to the draft, and it's going to be. And I said this earlier, and I think I put an article out about it. This has got to be Beane's best offseason to date. That he really can't afford to miss with any of his signings or re-signings. He can't afford to miss with at least his first 3 draft picks. They all have to kind of be plug-in-and-play type players. I know it's a lot easier said than done, and that's very rare. But that's how close we are, that we need Brandon Beane to make those moves this offseason. He's got to strike gold with everything he does. We can't afford to bring in another overpaid Carolina pipeline player who's just not going to get it done. We can't afford to draft a player that's going to take a long time. We have to strike gold this offseason, and we're that close to doing it.
Yeah. You know what? I totally agree. I just think that with the way we're going to head into this offseason, this has to be, like you said, this has to be Brandon Beane's best job. And we can give him all the credit that's due for the job he's done here in Buffalo. But you said by 2021 we'll be Super Bowl contenders. You said you wanted to bring a Super Bowl to Buffalo. It's now time to act on that. And we're going to hold you accountable. From this point on, you're being held accountable. What you've done does not matter now. Everything you've done is great. But if you can't bring the Super Bowl to Buffalo, if you can't get us to that promised land, then at this point it's a failure. And I'm sorry, that's just the measuring stick now. It is what it is.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like I said, we've had the taste for success now, and we're a fan base who's been starving for it for, damn near 20 years. So we're not going to be happy with a regression or a setback. So we're all the cards are on the table. We're putting all the chips in. We're going to win, and we have to do the right things to do that. And like I said, even though it's been a position that we've kind of neglected or we feel like it's not a priority, you want to win a Super Bowl, every position has to be a priority to the best of its ability. Not to say you can throw a first-round pick or a major deal at every position, but you've got to get the most bang out of your buck in every position. And cornerback too was at times a liability last year, and it's got to be addressed this offseason in a more permanent manner. We got to stop throwing Band-Aids on it, and in almost in a sense take advantage of Trey White and Poyer and Hyde while they're back there. They're not going to be there forever. And to not have a position in the cornerback that's solid is kind of a detriment to those guys, that they got to compensate for a weaker corner over there. Where if we had another cornerback over there that's very solid, we will be rolling out one of the best secondaries in the league.
Well, I'll tell you what. I think the solution to this problem is if you fix the pass rush and you get a more consistent pass rush, then honestly at that point, sometimes it doesn't matter who's at cover, corner one, corner two, or safety.
We could have a whole nother show about ranting about the pass rush. I'll tell you that much.
So I mean, if we fix the pass rush and you actually have a legitimate pass rush next season, top 10 real pass rush. And I'm not talking PFF stats pass rush because I think that's all I think a lot of that is garbage.
Yeah.
But if you have a legit top 10 pass rush next season, then yeah, you can roll Josh Norman out there for 16 games if you want and be just fine. But until you get that solved, doesn't matter who you put at cornerback, they're all going to suffer. But hey, Greg, I think we hit everything on the head today. I think that I think we're in agreement that Josh Norman back on the right deal is a fine fit, but you still have to fix it long term.
Agree 100%.
Hey, guys, once again, thank you for tuning in to another segment of the Bills Yac Podcast. Let us know your opinions in the chat or the comments about Josh Norman, and make sure that you're getting over to www.coldframereport.com and check out all these great articles, especially by my guy Greg here. Catch you later.
Take care.
The Buffalo Bills who win.
Blocked by Singletary, and it's caught for a touchdown.